My name is Sarah Hurwitz, and I am a fellow this semester at the Institute of Politics here at Harvard. And previously, I was in the Obama administration for 8 years, most recently as Michelle Obama's chief speechwriter, and I was also a senior speechwriter for President Obama. And before that, I worked on the Hillary Clinton's primary campaign in 2008. I was a lawyer. I worked in the campaign cycle in 2003 and 2004 for General Wes Clark and then for Senator Kerry. And before that, I was a speechwriter for Senator Tom Harkin. So, Michelle Obama is someone who knows who she is, and she always knows what she wants to say. So the most important part of the process was sitting down with her before I even started writing and just saying, what do you want to say? And she always just knew exactly what she wanted to say. So she would dictate brilliant ideas, she would dictate the main points she wanted to make. She'd dictate the points she wanted to make to support that point. She would dictate paragraphs of brilliant, beautiful, moving, thoughtful language. And then it was my job as a speechwriter to take all of that and weave it into a coherent draft. And then, I would send it around to my colleagues, get their feedback, and then I would send it to her, and she would really edit. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of editing. She engaged pretty deeply in her speeches, and, in the end, when she walked up to the podium, they were really her words. She did. That was her line, not mine. I just typed it into the speech, my only contribution. I think a lot of times when people say, how did you get Michelle Obama's voice, I think what they're really asking is, how did you get the voice of someone whose background is so different from yours? Mm-hmm. And the answer is that, while we come from very, very different backgrounds, we really share core values. When she talks about how in her family, education was like a religion, and getting into college was so important to her parents because they didn't have college degrees. They really wanted her and her brother to go to college. That was the message that my brother and I got from our parents. There was a real focus on education and working hard, and this idea that you are just entitled to nothing. You have to work for everything you have in your life. Those are very similar values, and so I think that shared values help a lot. I also think just a shared sensibility about what makes a great speech. There is no daylight between Mrs. Obama and me about what makes a really excellent speech. And I think that when you share a sensibility about speech writing with the person you're writing for, that goes a long way. It's very, very important. So I think those two things were the key to us working together. So, I worked mainly on girls' issues in my capacity on the White House Council on Women and Girls. So my focus was a lot on inspiring and empowering young women to use their voices in politics and civic engagement. We also did a big conference on the representations of girls and boys, gender in general, in media and toys, and what kind of messages were being sent to girls and boys. When all the toys for girls are much more geared towards playing house and stuffed animals and dolls, whereas boys, it's much more towards, building things and creating things. You really are kind of creating different, inculcating different skill sets in kids of different genders, and that doesn't make sense. It's just not acceptable. So, I think kind of overcoming barriers like that and even the toys, the media that kids see early on, that was something that I was really passionate about, and we had a conference about that last year there. I think there's a very intense connection. I think if you look through history, just take the civil rights movement. I think the speeches and the rhetoric and the letters, think of Letter from a Birmingham Jail of Dr. Martin Luther King, were hugely important to that movement. Really good speeches and speech writing and rhetoric can inspire people. It can empower people. I think about President Obama's campaign in 2007. The role of his speeches in articulating a really powerful, clear, moving vision for our country, that was what got so many people to get in their cars, drive to Iowa, to New Hampshire, all across the country, to be field organizers, to work for little to no money, very little sleep, because he really inspired people with the power of his words. So I think that, speech writing and activism very closely linked. Yeah, this is a really serious issue. People can certainly have different opinions in a democracy, and they should. It's very important. But they can't have different facts. If we're not all operating from the same base of facts or truths, we're in a lot of trouble. So I think that, it is the role of political leaders and other kinds of leaders to be rigorously honest and truthful in their speech writing, So I think, in the Obama administration, we had a very, very rigorous fact-checking operation. And that was actually true of previous administrations, Democratic and Republican as well. It seems a little bit less true of this current administration, but, we were intensely loyal to the truth. It was very, very important to us. And I think that, one way to combat this kind of, fake news, this kind of concerns about whether people are being truthful is for people to be incredibly careful about what they say and make sure that it's accurate and make sure it's true. I would say that I more channeled the voice of the President and First Lady. I didn't really help create it. They had their own voices and we were just there to help. But what am I most proud of? I'm really proud of a number of the speeches that I worked with Mrs. Obama with. I'm really proud of her Democratic National Convention speech in 2016 and her speech in 2008 as well, which was the first speech I ever wrote for her. I'm really proud of the speech that she gave in New Hampshire talking about the horrifying misogyny we were seeing from Donald Trump in that election, including his videotape where he bragged about sexually assaulting women. I think that the First Lady just really stood up and clearly articulated what so many people in this country were feeling, women and men. In response to that speech, we got so many emails and letters from women saying, I'm no longer going to feel ashamed of what has happened to me. Thank you for speaking on my behalf. We got a lot of letters from men, too, who said, thank you for saying that this is not how decent men behave. I don't behave this way. I have daughters. I have sons. This isn't what I want them to see. So I think she really was able to kind of articulate what a lot of people were feeling in this really difficult moment. And I'm proud of the way she inspired people. I'm proud of the way she brought people together. This was, to be part of that was the greatest honor of my life.